The nightmare always started the same way. Helmand Province, 2012. The smell of copper and cordite thick in the air. Petty Officer Sarah Mitchells pressed her hands against the arterial spray, feeling the hot blood pulse between her fingers with each weakening heartbeat. 23 years old, and she already knew what death felt like. It had a rhythm, a terrible, slowing rhythm. "Don't let me die, Doc." Ramirez's eyes found hers through the dust and smoke. "Please, don't let me die." She didn't let him die. Not there. Not in that God-forsaken valley with Taliban rounds cracking overhead and her SEAL team laying down suppressing fire. She kept him alive through the medevac, kept him alive through the helicopter ride, kept him alive until the surgeons at Bagram could take over. But alive wasn't the same as saved. Sarah's eyes snapped open at 0300 hours. She was safe. She was stateside. She was no longer Petty Officer Mitchells, Hospital Corpsman First Class, SEAL Team 7. She was just Sarah now. Just a nurse. Just another ghost trying to forget. Her studio apartment in 29 Palms came into focus through the darkness. Spartan. Clean. Everything had its place. The go bag sat by the door, packed and ready. Old habits died harder than old teammates. Her hand moved beneath the pillow automatically, finding the familiar weight of her Beretta M9. Chamber empty. Safety protocol. Another lesson from another ghost. The red numbers on her alarm clock glowed 0303. 3 hours until she needed to be awake. 3 hours she wouldn't sleep. Sarah sat up, letting the desert night air cool the sweat on her skin. Through the window, she could see the lights of Naval Hospital 29 Palms in the distance. 2 months she'd been there. 2 months of being invisible. 2 months of being someone she wasn't. The dog tags hung on her nightstand caught the moonlight. Not hers. She'd turned those in 3 years ago when Naval Intelligence had offered her the deal. These belonged to someone else. Someone she'd never met, but carried with her anyway. G.Y. Sergeant Daniel J. Mitchells, USMC, 1960 to 1983. Her father, killed in Beirut 6 months before she was born, blown apart by a truck bomb that took 241 Marines with him. She'd grown up with his absence, shaped by the empty space he'd left behind. Sarah picked up the tags, feeling the worn metal. Her grandfather had given them to her 3 years ago, right before the stroke took him. Master Sergeant William Mitchells. Chosin Reservoir. Frozen Chosin, they called it. 20 below zero and 120,000 Chinese soldiers surrounding 30,000 Marines. Her grandfather had been one of the ones who walked out. "Your daddy died a Marine," the old man had whispered, his voice already fading. "You live like one." She'd tried. God knows she'd tried. Sarah stood and moved to her small closet. Behind the civilian clothes and nurse scrubs, hidden in a locked case, sat the weapons. Disassembled M4A1, 6 magazines, level 3A body armor, her grandfather's K-bar knife from Korea, the blade worn but still sharp. The tools of a trade she'd sworn she was done with. But you were never really done. Not when the nightmares followed you home. Not when every helicopter that passed overhead made you flinch. Not when you still cleared rooms in your mind before entering them. She closed the closet. 0315 hours. Close enough. The cemetery opened at sunrise, but Sarah had a key. Being the daughter of a Marine killed in action carried certain privileges. Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking San Diego Bay, row upon row of white headstones stretching toward the Pacific. Dawn painted them gold. Sarah found her father's grave the way she always did. Section P, row 7, marker 183. She'd memorized the path years ago, could walk it blindfolded. G.Y. Sergeant Daniel J. Mitchells, April 12, 1960 to October 23, 1983. Beirut, Lebanon. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, beloved son, devoted Marine. Beloved son. They'd added that part later. her grandmother's touch. Sarah had never met her either. Cancer took her in '95. The Mitchells family had a habit of dying before their time. Sarah knelt, placing her hand on the cold marble. She was having conversations with a ghost who'd never held her, never seen her, never knew she existed. "I'm still serving, Dad." Her voice was quiet in the morning stillness. "Just differently now." A helicopter passed overhead. Navy Seahawk, probably from North Island. Sarah's hand didn't move toward the phantom sidearm anymore. Progress. Dr. Kelso at the VA would call that progress. "They say I need to move on, find peace, stop living in the past." She traced her father's name with one finger. But how do you move on from something you never had? How do you find peace when you don't know what it looks like? The stone offered no answers. It never did. Sarah stood, brushing grass from her knees. 6:20 hours. She needed to get moving. Naval Hospital 29 Palms was a 2-hour drive into the Mojave, and her shift started at 0900. Can't be late, can't draw attention, can't be anything other than perfectly, invisibly normal. She walked back to her truck, a 10-year-old Ford Ranger that had seen better days. As she opened the door, her phone buzzed. Unknown number, encrypted prefix. Her blood went cold. She answered without speaking. "Ghost Actual." The voice was filtered, distorted. "Commander Hayes, Naval Intelligence." Her handler. "Routine check-in. Status?" "Green," Sarah replied. One word. That was the protocol. "Any suspicious activity? Surveillance? Contact?" "Negative." A pause. Too long. Sarah's instincts screamed. "Ghost! We've received chatter. Unconfirmed but credible. Someone may be looking for witnesses from the Kabul investigation. Stay alert. Maintain protocol. Report any anomalies immediately." "Understood." "And Ghost?" Hayes's voice softened slightly. "You're doing good work. The testimony mattered. What you did mattered." The line went dead. Sarah stood in the empty parking lot, phone still pressed to her ear. The Kabul investigation. 3 years ago. The reason she'd traded her SEAL Trident for a nursing degree. The reason she lived under a different name in a different life. Colonel Marcus Drake. Drug trafficking, opium, Taliban connections. $50 million in illegal profits. And she'd been the one stupid enough to testify. Drake had done 3 years in Leavenworth. Light sentence. Too light. Men with his connections always got light sentences. He'd been released 6 months ago, and now someone was looking for witnesses. Sarah got in her truck and drove into the rising sun. Naval Hospital 29 Palms sat in the middle of nowhere, exactly how the Marine Corps liked it. 2 hours from civilization, surrounded by desert and the sprawling training grounds of the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center. If you wanted to hide something, this was where you put it. If you wanted to hide someone, this worked too. The hospital itself was newer construction. 3 stories of tan concrete and reflective glass, designed to withstand desert heat and the occasional sandstorm. It served the Marines training at the combat center, treating everything from heat stroke to training accidents to the rare but serious combat simulation injuries. Sarah pulled into the employee parking lot at 0845 hours, 15 minutes early. Not too early to seem eager, not late enough to seem careless. Perfectly, invisibly normal. The guard at the checkpoint waved her through without looking up. Good. Being forgettable was a survival skill. She made her way through the employee entrance, past the security desk where the day shift was just arriving. The hospital was already awake, that particular energy of a medical facility transitioning from night to day. Nurses giving report, doctors making rounds, the smell of industrial coffee and antiseptic. Sarah headed for the locker room to change into her scrubs when she heard the voice. "Attention, on deck!" Every Marine in the hallway snapped to attention. Sarah's body moved before her mind caught up, back straight, eyes forward. Old training, muscle memory. She forced herself to relax, to slouch slightly like a civilian would, like a nurse would. Gunnery Sergeant Frank Caldwell walked through the corridor like he owned it, 68 years old and built like a brick wall that time had weathered, but not weakened. 6'2", maybe 200 pounds of old-school Marine Corps muscle and scar tissue. His uniform was pressed sharp enough to cut, his ribbons telling a story that spanned 5 decades. Sarah recognized the important ones at a glance. Cold War service, Beirut, Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq. The man had been everywhere, done everything, and survived it all. His eyes swept the hallway, missing nothing. They passed over Sarah without stopping, but she felt the weight of his assessment anyway. He was head of hospital security. She'd been briefed. Former first sergeant, multiple combat deployments, mandatory retirement at 68, but kept on as a civilian contractor because nobody else wanted the job and nobody could do it better. He was also, according to the hospital gossip, a magnificent bastard who didn't suffer fools, didn't trust easily, and absolutely did not believe that young people these days had what it took. "As you were," Caldwell said, his voice carrying the particular authority of a man who'd spent 50 years making junior Marines jump. The hallway relaxed. He continued his morning inspection, checking sight lines, testing door locks, examining fire extinguishers like they were weapons in an armory. Sarah ducked into the locker room before he could circle back. Her heart was pounding harder than it should. Caldwell was just another Marine, just another veteran, no threat, no danger, but her instincts weren't convinced. She changed into her scrubs, pulling her hair back into a simple ponytail. The mirror showed her what she needed to see. Sarah Mitchells, 26, civilian nurse, new to the hospital, quiet, competent but not remarkable, forgettable. Not petty officer Sarah Mitchells, hospital corpsman, first class, SEAL Team 7. Not ghost actual. Not the woman who treated bullet wounds in Helmand Province and knife wounds in Kandahar. Not the woman who'd held dying men and told them lies about how they were going to be fine. Just Sarah. Just a nurse. She headed for the emergency department. The ED at Naval Hospital 29 Palms wasn't like civilian hospitals. Most of the patients were young, fit Marines with training injuries, heat stroke, dehydration, broken bones from tactical training. Occasionally something serious, but mostly it was patch them up and send them back work. Sarah's first patient of the day was a lance corporal who'd managed to break his wrist during a pugil stick competition. 20 years old, crew cut, still riding the adrenaline high of whatever testosterone-fueled stupidity had led to the injury. "Ma'am, I'm fine, really," he insisted as Sarah examined the wrist. "I can still fight." With a fractured radius? Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency, palpating the break. "Clean fracture, no displacement, but painful. You'll be in a cast for 6 weeks minimum." "But my unit ships out in 3 weeks for Mojave Viper. I can't miss that." Sarah met his eyes. She'd seen that look before. The desperate need to prove himself. The fear of being left behind. The certainty that missing one training rotation would somehow end his career before it started. "Lance Corporal," she said quietly, "you know what's worse than missing one training rotation? Getting to a real deployment with a wrist that didn't heal properly and failing your team when they need you most. You heal now, you come back stronger. You rush it, you're a liability." Something in her voice made him stop protesting. Maybe he heard the experience behind it. Maybe he just heard the absolute certainty of someone who'd been there. "Yes, ma'am," he said finally. Sarah splinted the wrist with movements that were too precise, too practiced for a nurse who'd supposedly never deployed. The technique was field expedient, the kind taught in tactical combat casualty care courses, not nursing school. She realized her mistake halfway through but couldn't stop. The muscle memory was too strong. The lance corporal didn't notice, but across the ED, Gunnery Sergeant Caldwell did. He stood in the doorway, observing. Sarah felt his eyes on her but didn't look up. She finished the splint, gave the young Marine his discharge instructions, and moved to her next patient. A case of heat exhaustion. Private first class, 19 years old, pulled from a conditioning hike. Vitals showed tachycardia at 142 beats per minute, blood pressure 88/52, elevated core temperature at 104 degrees. Not critical, but getting there. He had maybe 3 minutes before his kidneys started shutting down. "I need 2 large-bore IVs," Sarah said to the attending nurse. Her voice was calm but commanding. "Lactated ringers, wide open, and get me a cooling blanket, now." The nurse hesitated. "Shouldn't we wait for Dr. Morrison to assess?" Sarah's hands were already moving, starting the first IV with the smooth confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times under worse conditions. Under fire, with mortars incoming, with blood everywhere. "In 3 minutes his kidneys start shutting down. We don't have time to wait." The nurse's eyes widened, but she moved. Sarah got both IVs running, applied the cooling blanket, and monitored vitals with a level of calm that didn't match her supposed experience level. She was running the resuscitation like a combat medic, not a hospital nurse. The PFC's heart rate started dropping back toward normal, blood pressure stabilizing at 102/64, core temperature decreasing, crisis averted. "Nice work, Mitchells." Dr. Morrison appeared at her elbow, reviewing the chart. "Quick thinking, textbook management." "Thank you, sir." Morrison was the hospital's chief of surgery, mid-40s, competent if unspectacular. He'd been the one to approve her transfer from her supposed previous posting at Naval Hospital Balboa. Part of her cover story, part of the fiction that naval intelligence had built around her. "You've got good instincts," Morrison continued. "Where'd you say you trained before Balboa?" "Corps School, Great Lakes," Sarah replied with the answers she'd rehearsed 100 times. "Then general rotation before the transfer." Morrison nodded, already moving on to the next patient. But Sarah saw the slight furrow in his brow, the question that didn't quite add up, the timing that seemed too convenient. She was making mistakes, small ones, moving too fast, showing too much competence. In her old life, that would have been praised. In this one, it drew attention. And attention was the last thing she needed. The morning shift passed in a blur of minor traumas and routine cases. Sarah kept her head down, her movements careful, her competence deliberately muted. Just another nurse. Nothing special, nothing memorable. At 1100 hours, she took her break in the small staff room on the 4th floor. Away from the bustle of the ED, away from watching eyes, she bought a coffee from the ancient vending machine that dispensed something brown and vaguely coffee-flavored, and sat in the corner, alone. The room had a window overlooking the desert, miles of nothing in every direction. The combat training center sprawled to the north, tanks throwing up dust clouds in elaborate war games. To the south, the chocolate mountains shimmered in the heat. This was where Marines came to learn how to fight in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. While she lived in the shadows of what she had become, she was still the same person. 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 While she lived in the shadows of what she used to be, her eyes drifted to the bulletin board on the wall. The usual collection of hospital announcements, shift schedules, safety reminders, and one other thing, a poster for the upcoming Memorial Day ceremony at the base, honoring those who gave all. Her father's face wasn't on the poster. The Beirut bombing was ancient history now, 43 years. Most of the Marines on this base weren't even born when it happened. But Sarah remembered. She always remembered. October 23, 1983, 06:22 hours. A truck loaded with 12,000 pounds of TNT crashed through the barricade at the Marine barracks in Beirut. The four-story building collapsed in seconds. 241 Americans killed, the largest loss of Marine life in a single day since Iwo Jima. Her father had been inside. Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Mitchells, Force Recon, 23 years old, the same age Sarah had been when she deployed to Helmand. She'd spent her whole life trying to understand him, trying to know the man she'd never met. Her grandfather had told her stories. Her grandmother had shown her pictures. But you couldn't know someone from stories and pictures. You couldn't understand what it meant to be a Marine unless you'd lived it yourself. So she'd lived it. Enlisted at 18, made hospital corpsman, volunteered for SEAL team training, deployed to the same deserts and mountains where her father's generation had fought their wars. 3 tours, 6 years, 23 confirmed saves, and 1 testimony that ended her career. "Your daddy died a Marine," her grandfather had said. "You live like one." She tried, but living like a Marine when you weren't one anymore was harder than it looked. Mitchells. Sarah's head snapped up. Gunnery Sergeant Caldwell stood in the doorway, filling it with his presence. His eyes were sharp, assessing, missing nothing. "Gunnery Sergeant," she said, standing automatically. Another tell. Civilians didn't jump to attention for senior enlisted. She just marked herself again. At ease, Caldwell said, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. I've been watching you. Sarah's pulse quickened. Sir? You move wrong, Caldwell said flatly. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. You stand wrong. You react wrong. That Lance Corporal this morning, you splinted his wrist using field expedient techniques, not nursing school techniques, field techniques. I don't know what you mean. The heat casualty. You started IVs and implemented cooling without waiting for orders. That's not nurse protocol. That's tactical combat casualty care protocol. The kind they teach at Fort Sam Houston to corpsmen going downrange. Damn, she'd been sloppy. And just now, Caldwell continued quietly, when I walked in, you stood, automatically, like a junior enlisted addressing a senior NCO. Nurses don't do that. Sailors do. Sarah said nothing. Her mind raced through contingencies. Deny, deflect, disappear if necessary. The go bag was in her truck. She could be in Mexico in 4 hours, could disappear into a new life, a new identity, leave this all behind. I pulled your personnel file, Caldwell said. It's mostly redacted. Naval Intelligence SEAL. You know what that tells me? It tells me you saw something or did something that made powerful people nervous. And now you're here, hiding. I'm not hiding. Then what are you doing, Mitchells? Caldwell's voice wasn't angry, it was curious, concerned even. Because you're sure as hell not just a nurse. You're a corpsman. And not just any corpsman. You've got the look, the one they all get. SEAL Team Corpsman. Am I right? Sarah's jaw tightened. No point in lying to someone who already knew the truth. I don't know what you're talking about. Team 5? Team 7? Caldwell studied her face. 7. You've got that Coronado polish. How many tours? This conversation is over. Sarah moved toward the door. Caldwell didn't move to stop her, but his voice stopped her anyway. What's your father's name? Sarah froze. How did he know? How could he possibly? Why would you ask that? Because you've got that look, the one legacy kids get, the ones trying to live up to a ghost. Caldwell's voice softened, just barely. Who was he? Sarah's throat tightened. She could walk away, should walk away. But something in Caldwell's eyes made her stay. Something that looked like understanding. Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Mitchells, Force Recon, Beirut, 1983. The color drained from Caldwell's face. For the first time since she'd met him, the old Marine looked shaken. His hand reached out, gripping the back of a chair for support. Danny, he whispered. Jesus Christ, Danny Mitchells. You knew him? Caldwell sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. His hands were shaking. 50 years of being a Marine, and his hands were shaking. 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, Beirut peacekeeping operation. I was there, October 23rd. He stopped, swallowing hard. I pulled him out of the rubble. The room tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. You were there? First sergeant at the time. We'd been on perimeter patrol when the truck hit. Heard the explosion from 2 clicks away. By the time we got back, Caldwell's voice was thick with 43 years of grief. The building was gone, just gone. 4 stories of concrete crushed down to nothing. We dug for 3 days, found 89 men, some alive, most not. My father, he was alive when we found him, for about 30 seconds. Caldwell's voice cracked. He was conscious. He knew he was dying. His chest was crushed. Couldn't breathe, couldn't talk much. But he grabbed my hand. You know what he said? Sarah couldn't speak, could barely breathe. 26 years of wondering what her father's last words had been. 26 years of questions that no one could answer. He said, "Tell my kid to be brave. Tell them I did my duty." Caldwell looked up, tears streaming down his weathered face. He didn't know you were a girl yet. Your mom was only 2 months pregnant. But he wanted you to know he died doing his job, protecting his Marines. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard, the world spinning. 26 years of absence. 26 years of trying to know a ghost. And here was the answer, delivered by a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. I held his dog tags while they bagged him, Caldwell continued. I didn't know he had a daughter. Didn't know you existed until just now. But I remember Danny. He was a good Marine, one of the best. Tough as nails, but gentle with the young guys. He would have been a great father. Silence filled the room. Outside, the desert sun beat down on the training grounds, where young Marines practiced for wars that would define their lives. Inside, two warriors sat across from each other, connected by a ghost neither could escape. Finally, Sarah spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why are you telling me this? Because you're his daughter, and because I owe him. Caldwell straightened, wiping his eyes. Whatever you're hiding from, whatever you're running from, I'll help. That's a promise. Marine to Marine. I'm not a Marine. No, Caldwell agreed, but you're close enough. Your father's blood, your grandfather's legacy, that counts for something. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Encrypted. Her blood turned to ice. She answered. Go. Commander Hayes' voice was tight, urgent. Ghost Actual, we have confirmed intel. Drake knows your location. Repeat, Drake knows your location. Extraction team is 30 minutes out. Get to the roof and wait for pickup. Negative, Sarah said. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline spike. I have 34 patients in this hospital in minimal security. I'm not leaving them exposed. That's not your call, Petty Officer. It is now. Ghost Actual, out. She ended the call. Caldwell was on his feet. What's happening? Sarah stood, her mind already shifting into operational mode. The quiet nurse disappeared. The SEAL Team corpsman emerged. The warrior who'd survived 3 tours in 23 firefights and 1 impossible testimony. We have a problem, Gunnery Sergeant, and I'm going to need your help. Before Caldwell could respond, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the hallway in red. And somewhere in the distance, Sarah heard the sound that defined her nightmares. The sound that had followed her from Helmand to Kabul to every sleepless night since. Gunfire. The hospital was under attack. The gunfire came from the main entrance. 3 controlled bursts. Professional, military cadence. The unmistakable rhythm of trained operators engaging targets. Sarah's body moved before her mind finished processing. Muscle memory from 3 tours, overriding 3 years of pretending to be someone else. She was at the door, hand on the frame, head canted to listen. Counting shots, calculating distances, assessing threats. Get down, she said to Caldwell, but he wasn't getting down. He was moving with her, his body falling into the same tactical posture she'd adopted. 50 years of training didn't disappear just because you got old. How many? He asked. Unknown, at least 3 shooters based on fire pattern, suppressed weapons, coordinated entry. Sarah's mind raced through the building layout she'd memorized on her first day. 4 floors, 3 stairwells, 2 elevators currently locked down by emergency protocol, multiple choke points. They'll hit the main entrance, secure the lobby, then move floor by floor, clearing rooms. Security response? 2 guards on duty, both former MPs but retired, against professional shooters. Sarah shook her head. They're already down. The hospital's PA system crackled to life. A man's voice, calm and controlled and utterly chilling. Attention all staff and patients. This is a security drill. Remain in your current locations. Do not attempt to leave the building. This is a drill. Repeat, this is a drill. That's not a drill, Caldwell said. No, it's a hostage situation. Sarah pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the encrypted keyboard. Message to Commander Hayes. Hospital under attack. Multiple hostiles. Declaring imminent threat. Rules of engagement authorized. The response came back instantly. QRF en route. ETA 25 minutes. Hold position. 25 minutes. Might as well be 25 years. Sarah looked at Caldwell. I need to get to the 4th floor. Janitor's closet, East Wing. What's there? Insurance. Sarah moved toward the stairwell. You need to get the patients to a secure location. Surgical wing. It's got reinforced doors and only one entry point. Barricade it. Keep everyone calm. Keep everyone quiet. And what are you going to do? Sarah paused at the stairwell door. The transformation was complete now. No more hiding. No more pretending. This was who she was. Who she'd always been. A hospital corpsman who'd taken an oath to support and defend. A sailor who'd served with the best warriors America had ever produced. My job, gunnery sergeant, same as always. Protect those who can't protect themselves. She disappeared into the stairwell before he could argue. The building was eerily quiet. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red. Sarah moved up the stairs with practiced silence, her feet barely touching each step. At the 3rd floor landing, she heard voices below. 2 men speaking in tactical shorthand. Level 1 secure. 8 civilians restrained. 2 security guards neutralized. Copy. Moving to level 2. Target is female, late 20s, brown hair, approximately 5'3". Last known location, emergency department. Sarah froze. They had her description. They knew exactly who they were looking for. This wasn't a random attack or a robbery or terrorism. This was an assassination dressed up as something else. Drake. It had to be Drake. She continued up to the 4th floor, moving faster now. Time was a luxury she didn't have. The janitor's closet was exactly where she'd left it, unlocked and unremarkable. Inside, behind boxes of cleaning supplies and industrial mops, was a maintenance panel. Sarah popped it open. The locked case sat in the crawl space behind the wall. She pulled it out, her fingers working the combination lock from memory. 3 right, 2 left, 4 right. The lock clicked open. Inside was everything she'd sworn she'd never need again. The M4A1 came together in her hands like an old friend returning home. 30 seconds to assemble. Upper receiver to lower receiver. Bolt carrier group, charging handle, magazine well. She loaded the first magazine with 30 rounds of 5.56 NATO, chambered around, checked the ACOG scope. The weapon felt right. Felt like coming home to a house you tried to forget, but your body still remembered. Level 3 A body armor went on next. Not military grade, but better than nothing. Her grandfather's K-bar knife clipped to her belt. 3 more magazines in the vest pouches. A small medical kit, because old habits died hard. Because she was a corpsman first, warrior second. And finally, her father's dog tags. She pulled them over her head, feeling the weight settle against her chest. Sorry, Dad, she whispered. I know you wanted me to be brave, but I don't think you meant like this. Sarah moved back into the hallway. The hospital had gone completely silent now. No alarms, no announcements, just the hum of emergency systems and the distant sound of bootsteps on linoleum. She'd taken a radio from the security office on her way up, clipped to her vest now. A voice came through, male, professional, eerily familiar. All units be advised, target may be armed and should be considered extremely dangerous. She has combat experience. Do not engage alone. Use overwhelming force. Sarah's blood went cold. She knew that voice. Would know it anywhere. Colonel Marcus Drake. 3 years in Leavenworth hadn't changed it. The same calm authority. The same absolute certainty that he was right and everyone else was wrong. Drake, she said into the radio, knowing he'd hear it. Knowing he'd recognize her voice the same way she'd recognized his. This doesn't have to happen. Let the patients go. This is between you and me. Static. Then Drake's laugh, low and bitter. Doc, still trying to save everyone, aren't you? Even after everything, even after you destroyed my career, My life, my future. You're still trying to play hero. You destroyed your own career when you started trafficking opium. I was funding operations that kept Americans alive, operations that Congress was too weak to authorize. I was doing what needed to be done. You got Marines addicted to heroin to line your pockets. Casualties of war, Doc. Acceptable losses in service of a greater good. Drake's voice hardened. But you couldn't accept that, could you? Had to testify, had to tell the truth, had to be so goddamn righteous. Sarah moved while he talked, using his voice to mask her footsteps. She was on the third floor now, working her way toward the surgical wing where Caldwell would have moved the patients. So this is revenge? You're going to kill innocent people because I held you accountable? This isn't revenge, this is justice and correction. I'm here for two things, Doc. First, the Phoenix 7 compound in your pharmacy. $200 million worth of experimental cardiac revival drug. Very valuable on the black market. Consider it compensation for my time in Leavenworth. Sarah's mind raced. Phoenix 7. She'd heard about it in classified briefings. Experimental battlefield medicine. Could revive soldiers after cardiac arrest, buying crucial minutes for treatment. If Drake got his hands on it and sold it to hostile nations or terrorist organizations. And the second thing, she asked, though she already knew the answer. You, Doc. I'm here for you. Because you need to understand that actions have consequences. You took 3 years of my life. I'm going to take the rest of yours. The radio went dead. Sarah reached the surgical wing. The doors were barricaded from the inside, exactly as she'd hoped. She knocked in a pattern. 2 quick, 1 slow, 2 quick. Signal she'd given Caldwell before leaving. The door cracked open. Caldwell's face appeared, grim but steady. Mitchell's. You're armed. Yeah, well, seemed like the occasion called for it. Sarah slipped inside. How many patients? 34, plus 12 staff, all accounted for. The surgical wing had been converted into a makeshift fortress. Gurneys blocked the windows. Medical equipment formed a secondary barrier at the door. The patients, mostly young Marines with various injuries, looked scared but determined. Some of the more mobile ones had armed themselves with whatever they could find. IV stands, fire extinguishers. One Lance Corporal held a defibrillator like a club. It was the same Lance Corporal she'd treated that morning, the one with the broken wrist. He met her eyes and nodded once. Recognition, trust. Marines, Sarah said, and every head turned toward her. They saw the rifle, saw the body armor, saw something that didn't match the quiet nurse they'd known for 2 months. My name is Petty Officer Sarah Mitchells. I'm a hospital corpsman, first class, former SEAL Team 7. This building is under attack by hostile forces. But I need you to know something. We are going to survive this. Every single one of you is going home today. That's a promise. Hoo-yah? Silence. Then one voice, the Lance Corporal with the broken wrist. Hoo-yah, Doc. Others picked it up. Hoo-yah! Hoo-yah! Until the whole room echoed with it, the battle cry of sailors and Marines going into harm's way. Caldwell moved to her side. What's the plan? They want 2 things. Me and the Phoenix 7 compound in the basement pharmacy. We give them neither. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a hospital with wounded personnel. Yeah, Sarah checked her rifle. So we make that work for us, not against us. This is our terrain, our battlefield. We know every inch of this building. They don't. You're talking about going on offense. I'm talking about doing what we trained for, what we've always done. Sarah met his eyes. We protect those who can't protect themselves, no matter the cost. Caldwell studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. What do you need? I need you to hold this position. Keep everyone safe. Keep everyone calm. I'll draw them away from here. You're going after them alone? Alone is what I do best, Gunny. A young nurse, Corporal Chen, stepped forward. Ma'am, I can help. I'm Navy too. Hospital Corpsman School. trained in trauma care. If you're going into a fight, you might need medical support. Sarah shook her head. Too dangerous. With respect, ma'am, you don't get to decide that. These are my patients too. Chen's jaw was set. Besides, you taught me this morning, most good for the most people. That means keeping you alive so you can stop them. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to order her to stay. But she saw herself in Chen's eyes. The same desperate need to be useful. The same unwillingness to hide while others fought. The same fire that had driven her to volunteer for SEAL team training all those years ago. Stay close, stay quiet, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Caldwell handed Sarah something, a small metal object, worn and scratched. She looked down and her breath caught. A Purple Heart medal. The name engraved on the back, G. Sergeant Daniel J. Mitchells. Your grandmother gave this to me, Caldwell said quietly, 43 years ago. After the funeral, said someday Danny's kid might want it. I've been carrying it ever since, waiting. He pressed it into her hand. Bring it back, Sarah, and bring yourself back. Your father died protecting his Marines. Don't you dare do the same. Sarah closed her fingers around the medal. Semper Fi, Gunny. Semper Fi, Doc. Sarah and Chen slipped out of the surgical wing, moving into the blood-red emergency lighting of the hospital corridor. The building had become a maze of shadows and danger. Every corner was a potential ambush. Every sound was a potential threat. They moved in tactical formation, Sarah on point with the rifle, Chen 3 steps behind with a medical kit and one of the security guards' sidearms. A Glock 19, 15 rounds. Not much, but better than nothing. Contact left, Sarah whispered. 2 men in black tactical gear swept around the corner. Not military uniforms, private security contractor gear, expensive equipment, professional loadout. Drake's people. Sarah raised her rifle but didn't fire. 2 rounds would alert everyone in the building. Instead, she set down the rifle silently and pulled the K-bar, her grandfather's knife, the blade that had seen Korea and survived. Stay here, she mouthed to Chen. Sarah moved like water, silent, inevitable. The first hostile never saw her coming. She was inside his reach before he could raise his weapon, the knife finding the gap between body armor plates. Not a killing strike, a disabling one. The blade slid between his ribs, puncturing a lung. He went down without a sound, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The second hostile turned, saw his partner falling, saw Sarah. His eyes widened. He raised his rifle. Sarah was faster. She closed the distance in 2 steps, deflected the barrel with one hand, drove the knife into his thigh with the other. Femoral strike. Deep. He'd live if he got medical attention soon. But he wouldn't be fighting. Not today. Not for months. She zip-tied both men with medical tubing, gagged them with gauze, took their weapons, radios, and tactical vests. 2 HK-416 rifles with suppressors, 4 extra magazines, a fragmentation grenade, and most importantly, their radio frequency. Clear, she whispered to Chen. They moved deeper into the hospital. Sarah's mind worked through the tactical problem like a math equation. Drake had at least 12 men based on the radio chatter. She'd neutralized 2, that left 10, plus Drake himself. 11 hostiles against 2 defenders with limited ammunition and 0 backup for 20 more minutes. The radio crackled. Team 2, report. Team 2, do you copy? Silence. Damn it. She's taken out Team 2. All units, target is active and engaged. She's hunting us. Switch to defensive positions. Guard the package. The package, Phoenix 7. The basement pharmacy. As Sarah secured the weapons, her radio crackled with a transmission that made her blood freeze. Colonel Drake, this is Morrison. The target was last seen moving toward the surgical wing. Dr. Morrison's voice, unmistakable. Chen's eyes widened. Dr. Morrison? But he's... The inside man, Sarah finished, her jaw tight. She'd suspected a leak. Someone had given Drake the hospital layout, the security schedules, her location. Now she knew who. Drake's response was cold. "Good work, doctor. Remember our agreement. You help me, and your son comes home safe." Sarah's anger shifted to something more complex. She clicked her radio. "Morrison, I know you can hear me." Silence. Then Morrison's voice strained. "Sarah, I'm sorry. They have my son, Captain James Morrison, Marine Corps, stationed in Afghanistan. Drake's people, they sent me a video. He's in a cell somewhere. They said if I don't cooperate—" "Where are you?" Sarah asked. "Security office, monitoring cameras for them." Morrison's voice cracked. "I never wanted this. I tried to protect you. I approved your transfer here, gave you the cover story. I thought I could keep you safe and save my son. But Drake found out anyway." Sarah made a decision. "Dr. Morrison, listen carefully. In 10 minutes, the FBI will breach this building. When they do, you surrender immediately. Tell them everything. Tell them Drake admitted his son is hostage. They can help. Understand? But Drake will kill James. Drake's going to prison today. That's not a threat, it's a promise. Trust me, doctor. Do the right thing now." A long pause, then, Okay, I'll shut down the camera feeds, give you a blind spot. It's all I can do." "That's enough, thank you." The radio went silent. Chen looked at Sarah with something like awe. "You just gave him a chance. After he betrayed you." "He didn't betray me. He tried to save his son." Sarah checked her rifle. "That's not betrayal. That's love. Misguided, but love. And we don't punish love. We save it when we can." Sarah made a decision. She clicked the radio. "Drake, let's talk." Static. Then his voice, amused and angry in equal measure. "Doc, still alive. I'm impressed. You want me. Here I am. Let everyone else go, and we settle this. You and me. No one else has to die." Noble, predictable, and stupid. Drake's voice hardened. "You think I'm here for revenge? I'm here for profit. The Phoenix 7 is worth $200 million. You're just a bonus. A chance to correct a mistake I made 3 years ago when I didn't kill you in Kabul." Sarah's blood went cold. "What did you say?" "Helmand Province, 2012. That village, the civilians you saved. You think that was random enemy fire?" Drake laughed, and the sound was utterly devoid of humor. "I authorized that strike. I needed to eliminate local witnesses to our operation. But you had to play hero, had to save them, had to see what you weren't supposed to see." The nightmare crystallized. The village, the children, Ramirez bleeding out. All of it orchestrated, all of it planned. "You killed Ramirez," Sarah whispered. "I killed a liability. He was going to talk, going to report what he'd seen. So I made sure he didn't." Drake's voice was utterly calm, utterly certain. "Acceptable casualties, Doc. Just like today. Those 34 patients upstairs, those 12 staff members, they're all acceptable casualties if it means I get what I came for." Rage flooded Sarah's system. White hot and absolutely focused. 3 years of nightmares, 3 years of guilt. 3 years of wondering if she could have saved Ramirez. And all of it was a lie, a setup, a murder. "You want the Phoenix 7? Come and get it. I'll be waiting in the pharmacy. But Drake, you better bring everyone, because I'm not going down easy." "Oh, I'm counting on it, Doc. I've been looking forward to this for 3 years." Sarah ended the transmission, looked at Chen. "We're going to the basement. We're going to set a trap. And we're going to end this." "How?" With the one thing Drake never understood. Sarah checked her rifle. "I'm not a killer. I'm a corpsman. My job isn't to take lives. It's to save them, even when it means sacrificing my own." They descended into the basement. The pharmacy was a reinforced room with a heavy vault door, designed to protect controlled substances and expensive medications. Inside, row upon row of shelves held everything from basic antibiotics to experimental compounds, including Phoenix 7. Sarah found the secure cooler. Inside were 500 vials of clear liquid, each marked with biohazard symbols and classification stamps. $200 million, the future of battlefield medicine, and Drake's ticket to freedom and wealth. She pulled out her phone, sent one final encrypted message to Commander Hayes. Basement Pharmacy, 11 hostiles incoming. If I don't make it, tell my grandfather's family I died like a Marine. Tell Caldwell he kept his promise. And tell Drake he was wrong. Some things are worth dying for. Ghost, actual, out. Chen stared at her. Ma'am, what are you planning? Sarah looked at the young corpsman, saw herself at that age, full of conviction and certainty that right would prevail. She hadn't learned yet that sometimes right lost, sometimes evil won. Sometimes heroes died and the world kept spinning. Corporal Chen, I need you to listen very carefully. In about 3 minutes, a lot of bad men are going to come through that door, and I'm going to stop them. But I need you to survive. I need you to tell this story. Can you do that? I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. That's an order. Sarah pointed to a ventilation shaft. That leads to the loading dock. You crawl through, you get out, you find the FBI when they arrive, and you tell them everything. You tell them Drake admitted to Helmand. You tell them he killed Ramirez. You make sure that bastard never sees daylight again. Tears streamed down Chen's face. Please don't do this. I have to. Because 34 patients upstairs are counting on me. Because every Marine who'll ever need Phoenix 7 is counting on me. Because this is what I swore to do. Sarah touched the purple heart hanging around her neck. Tell Gunnery Sergeant Caldwell I kept the faith. Chen sobbed but nodded. Sarah helped her into the ventilation shaft, watched her disappear into darkness. Then she turned to face the door. She had one rifle, 6 magazines, 180 rounds, 1 fragmentation grenade, 1 knife, and 1 absolute certainty. Drake was wrong. She wasn't just a corpsman. She was a United States sailor who'd sworn an oath. To support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance, to obey the orders of those appointed over her. And her last order, from the only person who mattered now, was simple. Survive, fight, win. Sarah Mitchells, Petty Officer First Class, Hospital Corpsman, SEAL Team 7, took position behind the pharmacy counter. The radio crackled with movement. Drake's teams converging on her position. 11 men against 1 woman. She smiled. They still didn't understand. She'd been outnumbered before. In Helmand when the Taliban surrounded her aid station. In Kandahar when insurgents breached the wire. In Kabul when Drake's people tried to silence her the first time. And she'd survived all of it. The door exploded inward. Flashbang, blinding light, deafening sound. Sarah's eyes were already closed, her ears already protected by foam plugs she'd grabbed from the medical supplies. She'd been expecting it. Through the smoke and chaos, they came. Dark shapes with rifles, professional, coordinated, deadly. Sarah Mitchells, daughter of a Marine killed in Beirut, granddaughter of a Marine who survived Chosin, rose to meet them. And the hospital basement became a battlefield. The flashbang faded and Sarah moved. Not away from the danger, but into it, because that's what they never expected. Hostiles anticipated suppression, fear, defensive positions. They got violence of action instead. The first man through the door caught 3 rounds center mass before his brain registered the muzzle flash. Body armor absorbed 2. The third found the gap at his collar. He went down hard. Sarah was already rolling, changing position before return fire chewed up the counter where she'd been. Pharmaceutical bottles exploded in cascades of pills and glass. She came up behind a shelving unit, acquired the second target. Double tap. Headshot. Down. 25 rounds left in the magazine. She's behind the shelves, southeast corner. Sarah counted rounds in her head. The second hostile entered in a tactical stack, rifle up, scanning left. Sarah was right. He never had time to adjust. Her first round caught him in the shoulder gap between body armor plates. The second round, as he spun, entered through the side of his vest, where the protection was thinner. Combat medicine made her a better shooter. She knew exactly where the armor ended and flesh began. 23 rounds. "Flash out!" someone yelled. Sarah closed her eyes, turned away, opened her mouth to equalize pressure. The concussion washed over her like a physical wave. When she opened her eyes, 3 more hostiles were pushing through the door. She'd been counting on that. Sarah had pre-positioned a rolling medication cart at a specific angle. She kicked it hard. The cart rolled toward the entrance, blocking their immediate sightline. She used the 3-second distraction to move again, this time to the pharmaceutical refrigeration units. Steel casing that would stop rifle rounds. The hostiles engaged the cart, rounds tearing through thin metal and medication bottles in a storm of gunfire. Sarah flanked, came at them from an angle they'd already cleared. Classic L-shaped ambush, straight from Marine Corps urban warfare doctrine. Third hostile never saw her. She put 2 rounds through the gap in his neck protection, where the helmet ended and the vest began. He went down. 21 rounds. Fourth hostile turned. Sarah fired. Click. Magazine empty. Time slowed. She dropped the empty mag, hand already moving to her vest for a fresh one. The hostile raised his rifle. She slapped the new magazine home, chambered around. He fired. She dove left. His rounds went high, sparking off the steel refrigerator. She fired from the ground. 3 rounds, controlled, center mass. He stumbled back. 27 rounds in the new magazine. Fifth hostile was smarter. He'd taken cover behind a steel filing cabinet. Sarah couldn't flank. Wrong angle. She couldn't advance. He had superior position. Stalemate. But she had her grandfather's knife. And she had the fire suppression system. Sarah shot the sprinkler head above the fifth hostile. Water exploded downward under pressure, soaking him, obscuring his vision through his optics. He instinctively looked up. Fatal mistake. 2 seconds of distraction. Sarah closed the distance in that window, knife in hand. She didn't kill him. She disabled him. Hamstring cut to immobilize. Weapon hand slash to disarm. Pressure point strike to the neck to render unconscious. He went down, alive but out of the fight. That's when she heard the order to fall back. Fall back! Fall back to the corridor! They were retreating. 7 men left plus Drake. Sarah let them go, using the momentary reprieve to reload and assess. She was hit. Somewhere in the chaos, a round had grazed her left arm. Not serious, not immediately life-threatening, but bleeding steadily. She tore a strip from her uniform, made a quick pressure bandage with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 100 times. Corpsman first, warrior second. Always. The radio crackled. Drake's voice, no longer amused. "You killed 5 of my men, Doc. 5 good soldiers." "They stopped being soldiers when they started working for you," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline crash starting to hit. "They became mercenaries, killers for hire." "There's a difference." "And what are you? You've killed 5 men in as many minutes." "I'm a corpsman doing her job, protecting patients, protecting medicine that will save lives. There's a difference between murder and defense, Drake. You never learned it." "Keep telling yourself that." Drake's voice turned cold. "I'm done playing. I'm going to pump chlorine gas through that ventilation system. You'll be dead in 4 minutes. Painful death. Drowning in your own lungs." "Is that how you want to die, Doc?" Sarah looked at the ventilation shaft where she'd sent Chen. The young corpsman should be clear by now. Should be safe. But if Drake flooded the system with gas, anyone still in the vents would suffocate. She couldn't risk it. "Wait," Sarah said. "I'll come out, unarmed. You can have me. Just leave everyone else alone." Silence. Then Drake laughed. You're bluffing. You'd never surrender. I'm not bluffing. I'm negotiating. You want revenge? Here's your chance. Face to face. No more hiding behind radios and hired guns. Just you and me. The way it should have been 3 years ago. More silence. Sarah counted the seconds. 15, 20, 30. She could almost hear Drake's mind working through the variables. The ego that wanted to face her. The caution that knew she was dangerous. The rage that had been building for 3 years. Fine, Drake said finally, but not in the basement. Top floor, helipad. I've got an extraction bird inbound. You meet me there in 5 minutes, unarmed, or I detonate the C4 charges my men place throughout this building. Your choice, Doc. Die a hero, or let everyone else die because of your pride. The transmission ended. Sarah stood in the flooded pharmacy, water still pouring from the broken pipe, bodies floating around her, and made the same calculations she'd made 1,000 times before. One life versus many. Her life versus 34 patients, 12 staff, and one young corpsman who reminded her too much of who she used to be. The math was simple. The math was always simple. She dropped the rifle into the water, kept only the knife, her grandfather's K-bar. If she was going to die, she'd die holding something that mattered, something that connected her to the men who'd come before, men who'd made the same choice she was making now. She climbed out of the basement, water sluicing from her boots, blood dripping from her arm. The emergency lighting painted everything in shades of red. Appropriate. Everything ended in red eventually. The stairwell to the roof was clear. Too clear. Drake's remaining men had pulled back, regrouped, waiting for her. Sarah climbed anyway, each step heavier than the last. Not from injury, from knowledge. This was a one-way trip. Drake wouldn't let her live. Couldn't let her live. She'd destroyed him once. He wouldn't make that mistake twice. But maybe she could buy enough time. 5 minutes until the FBI arrived. 5 minutes until Caldwell and the patients were safe. 5 minutes was an eternity in combat. 5 minutes was also nothing at all. The rooftop door stood open. Beyond it, the Mojave night blazed with stars. Sarah had forgotten how beautiful the desert could be at night. No light pollution, no civilization, just the ancient light of distant suns and the cold wind that swept across millennia of stone. Drake stood at the center of the helipad, silhouetted against the sky. 6 men flanked him, rifles raised. A helicopter idled at the far edge, rotors spinning, pilot visible in the cockpit. Extraction ready, escape route secured. He'd planned for everything. Doc, Drake said, his voice carrying over the rotor wash. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Sarah walked forward, hands visible, knife still gripped loosely. I'm here. Let everyone go. Of course. I'm a man of my word. Drake gestured and one of his men held up a radio. All units, stand down. Release the hostages. Mission complete. Sarah heard the transmission echo, heard the confirmation responses. The surgical wing doors opening, the patients evacuating. Caldwell's voice, urgent and angry, demanding to know where Sarah was. She closed her eyes briefly. They'd be safe. That was all that mattered. Now then, Drake continued, moving closer. 3 years I waited for this. 3 years in a cell, planning. Do you know what Leavenworth does to a man? It breaks you, strips away everything except rage and the need for revenge. You did this to yourself, Sarah said quietly. You trafficked drugs, you got Marines killed, you murdered Ramirez, you orchestrated Helmand. All of it was you. I did what was necessary. Drake's control cracked, just slightly. The operations I ran saved American lives. The intelligence I bought with that money prevented attacks, stopped terrorists. But you couldn't see past your self-righteous morality, could you? You had to be the hero, had to tell the truth, had to destroy everything I built. I saw you execute unarmed prisoners. I saw you profit from addiction. That's not morality, Drake. That's basic human decency. That's the difference between a warrior and a war criminal. Drake backhanded her. The blow snapped her head sideways, split her lip. Sarah tasted blood but didn't fall, didn't move, just met his eyes with absolute defiance. With the same stubborn refusal to break that had gotten her through SEAL team training, through 3 deployments, through every impossible moment of her life. Still proud, Drake said. Still certain you're right. Let me tell you something, Doc. In the real world, there's no right and wrong. There's only survival, only victory. And today, I won. I got my revenge. I got my payday from selling Phoenix 7. And you got nothing except a bullet. He raised his sidearm. A Sig Sauer P226, standard issue for SEALs, probably taken from one of the men he'd corrupted. Sarah saw it coming, didn't flinch, didn't beg, just stood there with her grandfather's knife in her hand and her father's dog tags against her chest, thinking about Marines in Beirut, in Korea, in Helmand, thinking about all the impossible choices and how they'd led her here, thinking about her grandfather's voice. Your daddy died a Marine. You live like one. Live, not die. Live. The moment stretched. Drake's finger tightened on the trigger. Sarah's hand tightened on the knife. 20 feet separated them, too far to close before he fired. Unless. Sarah's training took over. She'd practiced knife throwing in Coronado, hours on the range with her SEAL team. Never perfect, never reliable. But sometimes when everything else failed, you took the impossible shot. She threw. The K-bar spun through the air, 70 years of family history rotating end over end. It struck Drake's gun hand. Not the blade, the handle. But enough. The gun discharged wild, rounds sparking off the helipad concrete. Sarah was already moving. She closed the 20 feet in 3 seconds, inside his reach before he could recover. They went down hard, grappling on the concrete. Drake was bigger, stronger, trained. A full colonel with 20 years of combat experience. 3 years, Drake snarled, his other. 3 years, Drake snarled, his other hand finding her throat. 3 years you took from me. Sarah's vision started to gray. His grip was iron. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Her hands scrabbled across the helipad, finding nothing. Her father's dog tags pressed against her chest, trapped between their struggling bodies. Your daddy died a Marine, her grandfather had said. You live like one. Live, not die. Live. Sarah stopped fighting the choke. Instead, she went for Drake's eyes. 2 fingers, sharp jab. He recoiled instinctively, grip loosening. She sucked in air, drove her knee into his solar plexus. He folded. She rolled free, grabbed her grandfather's knife from where it had fallen, stood over Drake with the blade ready. Do it, he gasped, clutching his stomach. Finish it. Prove you're just like me. Sarah's hands shook. The knife point hovered over his chest. 3 years of rage. 3 years of nightmares. 3 years of running. She could end it all right here. Could make sure he never hurt anyone again. Sarah, Caldwell's voice. She turned her head, saw the old Marine at the rooftop door. Behind him, Marines in full combat gear. Behind them, FBI operators in their distinctive black fatigues. The cavalry had arrived. But they weren't moving. They were watching, waiting to see what she would do. Sarah looked down at Drake, looked at the knife, looked at the man who'd killed Ramirez, who'd orchestrated Helmand, who'd hunted her for 3 years, who'd destroyed so many lives in service of greed and ego. And she made her choice. She flipped the knife, caught it by the blade, and threw it aside. To save lives, even yours. She knelt. To save lives, even yours. She knelt, pulled out the medical kit she'd kept on her vest, started treating the shallow cuts from their fight, even as FBI agents rushed forward to restrain him. Professional, efficient, a corpsman doing her job. Drake stared at her, uncomprehending. Why? Because someone once told me that the hardest thing isn't killing your enemy, it's showing them mercy when they don't deserve it. Sarah finished the bandage on his arm. That's what separates warriors from murderers. That's what separates us from you. And that's why you'll never understand people like me. People like my father. People like my grandfather. We serve something bigger than ourselves. The FBI hauled Drake to his feet, cuffed him, read him his rights. He never took his eyes off Sarah, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to comprehend a world where mercy existed. As they led him away, Caldwell approached. He picked up the K-bar, examined it, then handed it back to her. "Your grandfather threw this knife at a Chinese soldier in Korea," he said quietly. "The man surrendered. Your grandfather let him live. He told me that story once, in Beirut. Said it was the hardest thing he ever did, harder than all the men he killed. Said it haunted him more than the killing ever did." Sarah took the knife, the weight familiar and right. "Thank you for not shooting him, Gunny. That wasn't my choice to make, Doc. It was yours." Caldwell's hand rested on her shoulder. "And you made the right one. Your father would be proud. Hell, your grandfather would be proud. You just proved that 3 generations of warriors produce something better than we were. Someone who knows when not to kill." Sarah's legs gave out. The adrenaline crash hit like a freight train. Caldwell caught her, lowered her gently to the helipad. EMTs rushed forward with a stretcher. "Stay with me, Doc," Caldwell said. "I'm okay," Sarah managed. "Just tired. So tired." "You earned it. You saved 34 lives today. You stopped Drake. You protected Phoenix 7. And you did it all while keeping your humanity." Caldwell's weathered face smiled. Not bad for a day's work. As the EMTs worked on her, Sarah saw Corporal Chen. The young corpsman was wrapped in a shock blanket, face streaked with tears, but alive, safe. Chen saw Sarah and broke free from the EMT treating her, ran to the stretcher. "Ma'am, you're alive. Oh God, you're alive." Chen was sobbing. When I heard the shooting, I thought, "I'm okay, Corporal. You did good. You got out, you survived. You told the story. That's what matters." Chen gripped Sarah's hand. "You came back, just like you promised." Sarah squeezed back, feeling the Purple Heart still hanging around her own neck where it belonged. "Always keep your promises, Chen. That's the first rule." They loaded her onto the stretcher despite her protest that she could walk. Started an IV, checked vitals, treated her like a patient instead of a warrior. She hated it and was grateful for it in equal measure. As they carried her toward the stairwell, Marines stood at attention as she passed. Someone started a slow clap, then another. Then the whole rooftop erupted. Applause, cheers, hoo-yah, the sound of warriors acknowledging one of their own. Sarah closed her eyes and let it wash over her. 3 days later, she stood in Gunnery Sergeant Caldwell's office. Not an interrogation, not a debriefing, just 2 warriors talking about what came next. "Naval Medical Command called," Caldwell said, leaning back in his chair. "They want you back. Training role. Teaching advanced tactical combat casualty care. They're calling it the Mitchell's Protocol. Combat medicine under fire. Teaching corpsmen how to fight like warriors, and warriors how to save lives. You'd be good at it." "I'm happy being a nurse, Gunny." "Bullshit, you're a corpsman. Always have been, always will be. Question is, are you going to keep hiding, or are you going to own it?" Sarah looked out the window at the desert. Somewhere out there, young Marines were training for wars that would define their lives. Learning to shoot, learning to move, learning to survive. But who was teaching them to save? Who was showing them that the rifle was just a tool, and the real weapon was the human heart that refused to quit? "If I do this," Sarah said slowly, "I do it my way. No more hiding, no more pretending. I tell them the truth. Combat is hell. War is trauma. Killing changes you. And the only thing that matters is bringing everyone home, even when you can't. Even when the math doesn't work. you still try. Agreed. Caldwell stood, offered his hand. So, what do you say, Doc? Ready to train the next generation? Sarah shook his hand. On one condition, you help. These kids need to hear from someone who was there, who survived, who knows what 50 years of service looks like, who knows that getting old is a privilege denied to many. I'm retired. You're breathing. That means you're not done, Sarah smiled. Besides, someone once told me there's more than one way to serve. I think that someone was pretty smart. Caldwell laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. All right, Doc, you got yourself a deal, but I'm teaching the old school stuff. Hand-to-hand combat, land navigation without GPS, how to survive when everything goes wrong and all your fancy technology fails. Perfect. I'll teach them how to put people back together. You teach them how to stay alive long enough to need it. We'll make warriors who know how to be human. They shook again. A pact between generations, between wars, between two people who understood that service didn't end when the shooting stopped. It continued in classrooms and hospitals and wherever warriors gathered to pass their knowledge forward. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of 40 young corpsmen at Camp Pendleton, aged 19 to 24, eager, terrified, certain of nothing except that they wanted to serve something bigger than themselves. My name is Senior Medical Instructor Sarah Mitchells, she began. Before we start, I want to tell you about impossible choices, about what happens when you have 30 seconds to decide between saving one person or saving many, about what it costs to do this job, about the nightmares that follow you home, and about why, despite everything, it's worth it. She told them about Helmand Province, about Ramirez, about the civilians in the burning building, and the choice that haunted her nightmares. She told them about Drake and the hospital, and the decision to walk onto that rooftop, knowing she might not walk back off. She told them about mercy and why it mattered more than vengeance. You're going to face moments like that, she said quietly. Moments where every option is terrible and you have to choose anyway. And here's what I learned. You can't save everyone. The math doesn't always work. But you try. You always try. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. We stand between the innocent and harm. We are the shield when others can't defend themselves. And sometimes that costs everything. The classroom was silent. Then one hand raised. A young corpsman, barely 19. Ma'am, do you regret it? Serving? Seeing what you saw? Losing what you lost? Sarah thought about her father, about Beirut and the truck bomb and the Marine who died before he could meet his daughter, about her grandfather and Chosin Reservoir and the frozen mountains of Korea, about Ramirez and Helmand and every impossible choice and every scar and every nightmare that still woke her at 300 hours. Every single day, she said honestly, but I don't regret serving. There's a difference. My grandfather fought in Korea. My father died in Beirut. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. 3 generations of warriors. One mission that never changes. Stand between evil and the innocent. Protect those who can't protect themselves. That's not a burden. That's an honor. And today, I'm passing that honor to you. She paused, meeting each young corpsman's eyes in turn, seeing herself in their faces, seeing her father, seeing her grandfather, seeing the long line of warriors who'd come before and the long line who'd come after. That's the legacy. Not the wars, not the killing, the protecting, the saving, the refusing to quit when quitting would be easier. That's what makes us warriors. And that's what I'm going to teach you. At the back of the classroom, Gunnery Sergeant Frank Caldwell stood at attention, watching. He'd been skeptical when Naval Medical Command approved the new training program. Skeptical that kids these days had what it took. Skeptical that one woman could make a difference. He wasn't skeptical anymore. After class, Sarah walked to the Camp Pendleton Memorial, the Beirut Wall, row upon row of names carved in black granite. She found her father's name, traced it with one finger. The Purple Heart hung around her neck now, worn openly. No more hiding. I did my duty, Dad, she whispered, just like you asked. I was brave. I survived. And now I'm passing it forward to the next generation, to the ones who carry the legacy when I'm gone. Caldwell appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one. They stood together in silence, 2 warriors from different generations, united by the dead they carried and the living they protected. Your father would be proud of what you're doing, Caldwell said quietly. Training the next generation, passing on what you learned. That's the promise I made him 43 years ago in the rubble of that barracks. That if his kid wanted to serve, I'd make sure they knew what it really meant. Not the glory, not the heroism, the cost and the worth. Sarah leaned against the memorial wall, the names of the dead pressing against her back like hands pushing her forward. Thank you for keeping that promise, Gunny, for pulling me off that roof, for everything. Thank you, Doc, for reminding an old Marine why we do this. Caldwell raised his coffee cup. To Danny, to William, to every warrior who came before and everyone who comes after. Semper Fi, Sarah said. Semper Fi, Doc. They drank their coffee as the sun set over Camp Pendleton, painting the memorial in shades of gold and red. Behind them, 40 young corpsmen filed out of the classroom, heading toward their futures, toward deployments and danger and impossible choices. But armed now with something more than training, armed with truth, with legacy, with the knowledge that they stood on the shoulders of giants. Sarah watched them go and thought about her grandfather at Chosin Reservoir, holding the line against impossible odds. About her father in Beirut, carrying wounded Marines when the building came down. About every moment that led her here, to this place, to this purpose. She was 26 years old, and she'd already lived 3 lifetimes. She'd been a warrior and a witness and a ghost. She'd killed and she'd healed, and she'd nearly died for strangers who became family. She'd learned that mercy was harder than vengeance, and that living was harder than dying. And she'd do it all again tomorrow if they asked. Because service didn't end when the shooting stopped. Service was walking into classrooms and telling hard truths. Service was training the next generation to be better than you were. Service was carrying the dead with you always and using their memory to light the way for the living. Sarah Mitchells, daughter of Marines, keeper of promises, teacher of warriors, walked toward the setting sun with her father's purple heart against her chest and her grandfather's knife on her belt. Behind her, the memorial wall stood silent witness. Ahead of her, the future waited. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah didn't face it alone. She had her ghost to guide her students to train, her mission to complete. And an old Marine named Frank Caldwell, who'd promised her father 43 years ago that if Danny's kid wanted to serve, he'd make sure they served right. Promise kept, mission accomplished, honor satisfied. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. The words carved on every Marine memorial, the creed that defined generations, the legacy that continued, unbroken, from shore to shore and war to war. From Tripoli to Belleau Wood, to Iwo Jima, to Chosin, to Khe Sanh, to Fallujah, to Helmand, and beyond. Sarah carried it forward now. And someday, when she was old and gray like Caldwell, she'd pass it to someone else. Someone young and scared, and certain of nothing except that they wanted to serve something bigger than themselves. And the legacy would continue, generation after generation, war after war, sacrifice after sacrifice, until the last Marine stood, until the last corpsman healed, until the last promise was kept, forever.